Another important key to our multidisciplinary work at Cornell in nanoscience is a privately funded institute. A patron of the sciences named Fred Kavli donated $7.5 million to Cornell and made similar donations to a number of other private universities in the United States and Europe. That we've invested in an endowment that has income that is also matched by the university of between $500,000 and $600,000 a year, that's used as sort of a think tank about where nanoscience can go in the future. So each year we have a number of workshops looking at problems way out in the distant future. Questions of, okay, suppose you can measure an electrical signal from a neuron. Can you send an electrical signal to a neuron? Is there a way to hook up an electrical signal that can restore the operation of the eye or the ear or any part of the nerve tissue? Open-ended questions. There's a field of computer science called quantum computing, where you try to use new underlying science for making computer and communicating between different parts of a network. And the idea of this center is that the annual workshops would study something that's 5, 10, 15 years in the future and look at first the roadmap to get from the technology we understand today to the one in the far distant future, and then what the scientific possibilities are. This has only been in existence for a year. We've had 2 meetings. Our first one was a conference for science writers when we had a dedication of our new nanotechnology building, and we explained what nanotechnology was all about. And we had a course called Nanotechnology 101, and the reporters put on the space suits and went into the clean room and made sample objects. Our second conference was in December, just a month ago, and it was held jointly with the Japanese Ministry of Education and Science at Cornell, with a group looking at molecular electronics, that is, signals that come from single molecules. Another very important part of multidisciplinary research, and in fact any research, is paying attention to the applications that research can have for the general welfare of mankind. Modern research university, in my opinion, has 3 purposes. The first purpose is the generation of new knowledge. The second one is the training of the next generation of scientists, scholars, and leaders. And the third one is the transfer of the new knowledge to the general population. And one of the organizations that we have, by the way, all of these organizations that I've talked about are among those that report to me in my new day job as a Vice Provost for Research and Science Policy Officer for the university. But one of these is our technology organization, Cornell Center for Technology, Enterprise, and Commercialization. And this is a poster that represents the invention of Web of the multi-photon microscope. And the idea there is we have a number of specialists in the marketing of patents. Cornell inventors bring ideas to this foundation, and the foundation then sees that patents are, if it looks like it's something that has commercial usefulness, or if it's something that we want to protect for mankind in general, because some of our agricultural inventions are related to rice, and we want to make certain that there is protection of that result of the genetic improvement of rice that's available without anybody taking commercial advantage of it, so that it goes both ways. It's protection of intellectual property, but some of it is for the hope of sale of the intellectual property. That's brought to this organization, and that organization then finds corporations that might be interested in using it and obtaining a license. We also start small spin-off companies, as do many organizations. Last year, Cornell had the third largest number of spin-off companies of any university. It was probably a fluctuation, but the number one was the entire University of California system, which has 6 campuses that are huge, San Diego, Berkeley, Santa Barbara. It's a big system put together. It's 20 times larger than Cornell. The number 2 was MIT, and Cornell was the number 3 in spin-off companies. Okay, so what have we learned about multidisciplinary research? First is the characteristics of effective collaborations. First, effective collaborations use existing strength in disciplines, or at least that's what our experience. We started off taking a very, very strong discipline at Cornell, the high energy physics, and that strength was leveraged to develop materials and then disciplines between various engineering and fundamental science fields in the physical sciences and then the life sciences. The effective collaborations and the ideas for those grew out of discussions among scientists as well as recognized leaders. That is, the work is not proposed by the president of the university or somebody in the central administration. It comes from people who see there's an opportunity to do this, and you have to create an environment where they can sit and talk to each other. And the best ideas don't come from the old guys who are the bosses. The best ideas come from, this works, I guess. And so that it comes from multiple generations of scientists. The people have to be willing to share resources. And then a very, very important thing for both innovation in the science and preservation for the future is that the group has to share in the educational and training activities. An extremely important part of all of this, and especially the collaborations, is the students and the student interactions, and especially in American research universities, the graduate students and the postdocs that interact with each other across the disciplines. And then there has to be a willingness to welcome new scientific associations. Now, why do I believe that mixing of disciplines frequently produces stronger innovation? Well, at Cornell, our experience was that physical scientists and engineers invent important new techniques to attack significant problems in biology, protein, cell, neurobiology, and medicine. And both groups are benefiting. That is, the actual invention of new ways to see things and put things together it depends in a large part upon the skills that the engineers and physical scientists have, but a detailed knowledge about what the significant scientific problems are in biology comes from the biological disciplines. But in order to make progress, it needs cooperation between both areas. The lessons that we learned was, one, you start with small collaborations between people in a few fields and let them grow and develop and see what the success is. And then you develop excellence in a few areas with the collaborations. And then once that excellence is developed, the growing reputation makes it possible to develop other key specialties. And then finally, we expand the breadth of the fields in the collaborations. These 4 steps are really critical. It's almost impossible to start at the top and plan, okay, we're going to have a multiversity that has multidisciplinary research, and we're going to do the following things, and you pick a list because the required specialties aren't there, and you have to grow slowly and develop trust and reputation because it's a time investment required by all the people that are involved in the research, and so there has to be some real reward for the time and effort that's put into it. And the last point is very critical to the future of society and the science, and that's communicate with the public. The public has to be aware of the purpose of the science, what it's for, and it's the duty of people in the scientific community to discuss this in a continuous way with the general public. It allays fears that they might have that the world's changing too rapidly, and it also ensures that there is greater public support for paying for the bill for doing the science. So that's my basic idea on multiple science.
Thank you. And now we are open for questions. Well, I have one then.
Okay.
I found out from reading your autobiography that before you went back to grad school, you joined and worked for the Army for 6
business.
months.
Right.
Yeah, right. So we have a little bit of similar situation here at this organization that some of our researchers here work here to pay off their debt. So my question is how to motivate people when they are obligated to work here.
Let's see if I understand the question.
We talk about how to inspire people, work, and we talk about collaboration. Like in our organization, we really focus on that too, to collaborate and work with others. But then we have this thing about some people are obligated to be here and to work here. We're not talking about 2 years. We're talking about 20 years.
Yes.
Maybe we need some thing that can inspire us. Like, hey, let's make the change and make good things and contribute to the world.
You've asked a very complicated question because there are too many other motivational things I know. Suppose you want to change. Do you lose your job? Is there security in it? I came along at a time that was, as Dickens said, the best of times and the worst of times. I graduated from college in 1958, and in those days, the United States had a draft or conscription. Everybody had to go into the military. I had an opportunity to go in for only 6 months, and that sounded wonderful to me. So I went in as an officer. There were no wars on then, so that I did not face being shipped to some distant country, and it didn't even seem remotely possible that such a thing would happen, so I wasn't worried about that part of being in the military. And so being there and having to take courses, and what were the courses? I was being trained to be an Army officer, so I was being trained in management. I was being trained actually in how to run a platoon that repaired jeeps and tanks. And prior to going into the Army, I thought I wanted to go to a business school and get a master in business administration and maybe someday be a giant in industry, president of General Motors or something like that. Okay, while I was in the Army, I hated it, not because I had to wear a uniform and march and salute and all those things, because that's what military does. No, what I hated were the courses they were given in how to manage this platoon and how to fill out all the forms that you needed to order the parts to repair the Jeep and tank and make sure that the inventory was right at the end of the month. And so I started thinking, well, if I don't like this, why on earth do I think I want to go into business? Probably the most efficient people in training people to be managers of small business in the history of the world are the ones that run the military, because that's what it's all about. And so that having to make a break in my life made me think about what I wanted to do. So it was at that point I decided, I don't want to do this. I want to go back and do research. And that's when I decided to go back to do graduate work in physics. So for me, the important discontinuity in my life, time of change, the place that made me think about doing something was being forced to do something I didn't want to do for a short period of time. And in that process, I had to think about what I really did want to do. I don't know how you could do that within a single organization unless it's organized in some very peculiar way. So I don't think I've answered your question, but I told you about my own personal experience in it. Did I wear everybody out? There's some.
Hi, my name. Sorry. My name is Vibhu Piyawan.
A little further away.
Hi, my name is Vip.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to ask you whether how to be trained as a good scientist. How to be trained just to be just like you. What type of people?
I don't know about what. Well, actually it's a much deeper question than I think you've asked, because there is no special unique path to being a good scientist. And I've been let's see, I went to Cornell in 1966, and I've been on the faculty there ever since, and I've had lots and lots of students and postdocs that work with me, and they were all different. Some people are really good with their hands, gifted. They can, some have magic in what they can do with their fingers, and have this patience and this imagination. Other people are mathematically very gifted, and they can see things that seem to have come from another planet or from a deity, and the thought of it, they can see through walls or something like that. They're not really that good, but so there are gifts in the brain. There are others that work well in groups, and just seem to be able to glue together other people and take the ideas and take them back and forth, but still have a basic understanding of those. Those are all different skills. Some people are introverted and want to work all alone, and they can be productive. There is no one particular recipe, so how do you train people to do it? The training is, this is now for the basic research science and technology, is actually in the doing and finding, teaching an individual how to discover their own strengths and harness those strengths in doing something productive. And that, for me, is the joy of being a university professor. Now, not everybody, in fact, most of the people that are trained to do the research aren't going to be university professors. But for me, an important reward was being able to take somebody who had not done research, didn't know whether they could do research, work with them, and eventually they become more expert in whatever they were doing than I could ever imagine being. So they start out not knowing anything, and then they say, "Get out of my way, I know more about that than you do." And that is the most exciting time in professional life of somebody that's a teacher. So my answer is that the people are all different. There are skills that can be developed, and one can talk broadly about them in different areas, but then let each individual learn what their greatest strength is, and then help them to harness it and develop it.
May I ask a question? I saw your LEPP started in 1948, right?
Yes.
And I also visited Stanford and Berkeley, and
yes,
there are also particle accelerators.
They certainly did.
In those days.
They were there, and now Stanford and Cornell were the ones that remain with them on the campus. And yes, that's correct.
And my question is, how can we inspire government to spend more investment in science? Because that's our job too, not just inspiring the new scientists.
That's a really important question. And you know, the very last point on my very last transparency was communicate to the public that the only way that we can get the public to support it, and the government to support science and make significant investments is to tell them what it's for, what the benefits will be, and why that science is going to drive the economy. There's another aspect. The United States is a very large country, so it has the resources of 300 million and the economy of that to be able to consolidate so that a few very large things like the accelerators could be built. And we see now that in Europe, the European Union is now consolidating many of the scientific programs, and that will be an even larger economy with the ideas of making some of the required larger facilities and sponsoring some of the collaborations. I think for countries like Thailand and the smaller countries in Asia, the future's got to be first developing an interest of students in becoming scientists, and then developing multinational collaborations across the fields of research.
And another question, you talk about collaborative and multidisciplinary. Obviously, people come from different backgrounds. How do you manage big projects and different kind of people? How do you put the leadership in the joint projects and make it successful?
The interesting thing is, I think that trying to deliberately and too carefully manage it, especially in an American research university climate, is a mistake. You know, we have probably an awful tradition, but it's something called tenure. So every faculty member of a major university at a certain point in career gets a franchise, and they can be there for life, no matter what. No matter how bad, unfortunately, they have that job. So what we have had to learn in that system is they have to produce primarily incentives instead of punishments. There have to be better rewards for more productivity, better scientific productivity, and multidisciplinary research and interdisciplinary research are modes to more effective innovation. They're not the only roads, but they're very important roads. Okay, so that's one piece of it. But the next piece of it is, with very few exceptions, we discovered that the most effective collaborations and innovations are self-generated. That is, a group of people see, hey, there's this opportunity that we can do this. And frequently they're encouraged by requests from the federal government, but sometimes they're sponsored by our own people. And they get together and they pick their own leaders. Some people are willing to work countless hours in planning and describing the proposals and organizing other people to attack a program. And those just sort of naturally rise as the leaders, and it's spontaneous. And I think there might be more organized ways of doing it, but I'm skeptical about whether they're more effective. People become leaders because the others respect them, so that regardless of age and range, if the people have better ideas and are doing the work, the people around them recognize that and say, okay, you're our boss, or you're the hero, or you're the one that can dole out the rewards.
Okay, and I think maybe we have one last question.
Okay. I can hear you. I hope the others can. Right. Yes. Some fields. I understand your point of view, but there's some science that is so fundamental and so far off in the future that nobody can possibly imagine the end product that will come out of that. So if you depend only upon the commercialization and, say, corporate sponsorship of research, some of the basic things, for instance, my entire career in studies of low temperature physics and superfluid helium-3, nobody would have ever supported that. That's utterly useless from the standpoint of a practical application. So that you need both. You need, now, if I say in defense of that research, it has applications that are 50 years off from the date of the discovery. In fact, it was 25 years after the discovery before the Nobel Prize was awarded for it, because it dawned on them that science had a deep parallel with descriptions of the creation of the universe. Now there are people that are looking at there are people that are looking at the complex behavior of polymers that do have practical applications that actually are related to the work the theoretical description of the work we did on superfluid helium-3. But there is no way that a corporation would have invested in those studies back in 1970 for applications that are going to show up in 2004 and 2005. So what you said is correct in part, but there are long-range projects that I think can only be done and should be done because the science is very interesting at the time for its own scientific end.
We are discussing what to do next week. Next week we are having some kind of Children's National Day. We are celebrating every year doing something good for our children. So they're discussing what to do with the children nowadays because they spend more time wandering around the discotheques and some other entertainments. So again, I just wondering whether we can provide these children a choice of being scientists. So in this sense, we have to convince them that being scientists is a wonderful thing in the world. And then before we train them, I think we have to do some kind of a test, or a test on them, maybe aptitude test or something, that they could be good scientists in the next decade. So you have any recommendations in this sense? How can we test them out and how can we convince them to be in our area of being scientists? Please.
Is this working now? And maybe it won't make a noise. I was agreeing with everything you said until we got to the aptitude test. And now I'm skeptical about aptitude tests. But so the first thing is, the only way I think you can attract people to science is to persuade them that it's worth the time and the effort. Science is hard, mathematics is hard, and so that they have to understand that there's some reward. And certainly in the United States, scientists aren't very highly paid compared to the managers in business that I decided I didn't want to be. So why does one want to be a scientist? Well, there are two reasons I know of. One is the opportunity and the thrill of discovering something that matters that nobody ever knew before. But that takes a lot of discussion for people to understand that is one of the greatest highs I ever had. When we were doing our central part of that discovery on superfluid helium-3, I was living on 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night and never even feeling tired. It was just such euphoria knowing that these new things were being discovered. But then another important motivation is the ability to invent and devise a new technology that really matters to society. So it's somehow or other we have to communicate that to the general public, and certainly in the United States we haven't. We have as many frivolous people as any country in the world where discotheques and whatnot consume things. Now, I'm very, very skeptical about aptitude testing, and I'll tell you why. One night in my laboratory, I was working with several of students at different apparatus. We have a big laboratory with lots of things that are holding liquid helium, and we had a number of visitors. One was a professor from Japan, and suddenly it came up that we had to identify the color code on a resistor or something. I've forgotten what it was, but it became necessary to be able to tell a color. And it turned out that out of the Caucasians in the room, 4 out of 6 of us were colorblind. I'm one of them. And our visitor from Japan said, do you know, in Japan, you would not have been allowed to go to the middle school for the scientific track because you would have had a test. In Japan, very few people are colorblind, okay? But it would have had a test, and they would have decided that it was not worth investing all the extra time and effort in your training because you had such a serious defect. I started off at one point, in addition to thinking about electrical engineering, chemistry. And this was back in 1954, 55, and I took a course called quantitative analysis where you had to put this color indicator, phenolphthalein, in a solution to figure out how acid or base it was. And I couldn't see the endpoint when it turned from pink to blue. And I went to the professor, and I fell way behind. It was the first time I ever got way behind in an experimental course. I went to the professor and said, I can't see the endpoint in this titration. And they'd already invented a thing called a pH meter, electrical signal, telling you when that changed. Can I use that? And the professor looked at me and said, no, that's your tough luck. You should not be a chemist if you're colorblind. And so then I became a physicist. But so that of course is one particular test, so that in certain cultures I would have been forbidden to be a scientist. But if you try to measure mathematical skills, there are I know very brilliant physicists who were dyslexic, as read backwards. So they made very bad grades when they were very young. I have a close colleague in my department who has large number of honors, and he was 18 years old before he could really read and write effectively and do mathematics. So I don't know any test that he could have taken, and yet he's one of the he's 7 years older than I am, and he's been one of my mentors in my life. So I would want to go very cautiously in measuring aptitude to separate the potentially qualified from the unqualified. I think the most important quality is desire. Somebody that really shows that they're interested in and care a whole lot and are willing to work hard. And one of the expressions of a friend of mine who's been very successful in developing difficult projects, who said, who's going to put his body across the railroad tracks for this project? That is, sacrifice everything to make sure it happens. So I'm not sure I answered the question, but I gave my opinions on it. A what? Well, that's just one of those, and it helps a little bit in inspiring people, but there's lots of things. I just think that on American television, most of the time, the scientists are portrayed as a weird guy that's wearing a white coat and has thick glasses and is a little bit crazy, and he's going to do something that's going to end the earth, and that's not a very good image. And so Leon Letterman, who's a Nobel Prize winner in physics, actually wrote an idea of having a nighttime romance adventure where the central characters were a man and woman research scientist, and it would talk about how much fun they had both in the laboratory and going to parties and with sex and all those things that they show in the others, just to make scientists look like they were normal people and like the rest of the population. I think that it takes lots of effort and lots of approaches. I think for the general public, for scientific appreciation, we can't assume that everybody's been to university or everybody's had advanced mathematics. So and one can put a lot of thought into how to explain the basic scientific ideas to the average person that has a very, very simple education, to at least make them think about it and maybe perhaps their children will be interested in being scientists because they have a better appreciation of it. Don't have any better ideas.
Any more questions? If there are no more questions, as an appreciation of you coming here today, I'd like to invite Dr. Manoon Aramrat, the Inspector General from the Ministry of Science and Technology, to present a souvenir and address the closing remarks.
Professor Richardson, distinguished guests, Today we are very fortunate to have come to listen to this excellent lecture by Professor Richardson, the Nobel laureate in physics. Today he inspired us how to do research in how to inspire and train the people who will solve the world's problems in 21st century by presenting to us of what would take to train people, what would take to inspire people to solve the world problems. Today we listen to the presentation on the multidisciplinary science and a modern university. This is the main theme of the presentation. And within the theme, there's a very important key substances that we should take with us after this lecture. Multidisciplinary has been presented to us as the mixture, the multidisciplinary in nanotechnology, in modern biology, and in information technology. Those are multidisciplinary in itself, actually, and they have to cross multidisciplinary among them also. This is one important message that we have today. If Thailand wishes to advance in science and technology for the future, I suppose, maybe we look forward 50 years from now. And modern university means the university with advanced research facilities and research tools, multidisciplinary program, university with nano-scale facilities, and the university with effective collaborations. And last but not least, it's a university with ability to communicate with the public. I find this is very important elements to fit in what's so-called the modern technology, a modern research university. Of course, the audience today are multidisciplinary in themselves. They both come from universities and come from research institutions. In Thailand, we hope that collaboration will be ever increasing in the future for research and development. And we also hope that Thai researchers will have some opportunity to collaborate with Cornell University in the future. And they will have opportunity to become your students, perhaps become a co-researcher with you and associate with the university. On behalf of the Ministry of Science and Technology today, I would like to thank the International Peace Foundation for providing us this opportunity to have Professor Richardson with us today. I would like to thank the Bridges, the Dialogue for Peace program that have facilitated the event to be taken place here and to be taken place in many other places under the Ministry of Science and Technology. And finally, I would like to thank Professor Richardson for his kind advice to us on how to inspire people, how to inspire research to solve the world problems. With that, I would like everyone to give a big hand to Professor Richardson again. Thank you very much.